You still here? Did you hear what I said, boy?
I was...
You're hiding, aren't you?
No, I was just...
The video arcade is down the street. Here we just sell small rectangular objects. They're called books. They require a little effort on your part and make no beep 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 beeps. On your way, please.
I know books. I have 186 of them at home.
Ah, comic books.
No, I've read Treasure Island, Last of the Mohicans, Wizard of Oz, Lord of the Rings, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Tarzan...
Whoa. Come. Who are you running away from?
Okay, retro go. Fire, go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 276. And our movie this week is 1984's The Neverending Story. And joining me, because he had not seen it, and I had to fix that, it's Steven. Steven, how are you?
I'm doing great, Travis. Thank you so much for having me on your fine show. 270 some episodes. That's amazing. That is amazing. You found that many people who didn't see movies or you didn't see movies they wanted. That's incredible that there's that many movies. Really?
Yeah, I know. It's honestly, it's kind of crazy that there are, but this is just the gift that keeps on giving, which is wonderful. All right, so you had not seen this movie before. It came up in conversation we were having, I think, during an episode of Those Were the Days that we both co-host, and immediately, because we're all four of us on that show are roughly within a few years the same age. And Audie and Amy and I all audibly gasped, followed by, "You have to watch this."
Right.
So first thing I want to know is, what, if any, history did you have with this movie? Like, it's inescapable. You knew it existed, but like, what did you know about it prior to us watching?
Yeah, this is one of those movies that your friends of a certain age will be like, "You need to watch this with me," kind of things. Like when you're 6, 7, 8. You know, back in the early '90s, you were let loose to watch whatever movies you wanted with your friends because there's nothing bad on TV. You know, that's why RoboCop has a kids toy line.
Right.
You just and this was one of those shows or one of those movies that I had a friend across the street who loved it. It's like, you need to watch Neverending Story with me. And something about this movie was just off-putting, and I could not get through it. Despite loving the Muppets, loving Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, like I liked puppetry, I liked real stuff. This movie's puppets, along with the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, I was freaked out by. I just couldn't handle it. I'm like, something is not okay with what's going on here. And I just could never make it through it. And we never watched it in school. It was never one of those movies that was rolled in on the TV cart. So it wasn't forced on me. My mom loved it. I found out today that she was a big fan of it when it came out a year before I was born. So she was like, "Oh, he'd certainly love this movie. I could never get through it."
All right. So you had attempted to watch it and just couldn't do it?
It's right. I remember mostly all I remember is Falcor.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
I
All right.
remember nothing else. So effectively, I have never seen this movie.
Sure. No, if that's all you can remember and you didn't really sit through the whole thing, you didn't see
Yeah.
this movie. So I definitely saw this as a kid. It came out 1984. I'd have been like 3-ish years old. So I didn't see it right away. Saw it a few years later. Definitely watched it more than once as a kid. I don't remember if it was at a friend's house, at my own. I'm pretty sure we owned it. But it was one of those movies that I knew growing up, and I had seen a lot. I had seen, and it was like, oh yeah, the Neverending Story. It lived in a space for me. You mentioned the Dark Crystal, which I didn't see growing up,
Mhm.
but Labyrinth I did, and also one that I did see. Now, here's the funny thing. Okay, I didn't see the Dark Crystal, but I saw Legend when I was a kid, and if you've seen
Oh, wow.
Legend, you know that one is real dark and real scary, and not really aimed at kids at all. But it was just one that I happened to see because, again, it was, the 80s, early 90s. Things you got exposed to stuff that maybe you wouldn't have in a more recent era. So
Kids were made out of different stuff then, you know?
it's
Our
true.
grandparents had to, like, kill chickens, and we were exposed to traumatic, and frightening imagery. So
Yes. Uh, and so, like, this was a movie that very much as a kid existed in that same sort of realm as Legend for me, where it was creepy and scary, but I really enjoyed it and I liked it, and I didn't mind being scared by it.
Mhm.
Um, so that was kind of where it was for me. So now that you've seen it all the way through, as an adult, it's going to hit a little bit differently. But what did you think of it just as a movie watching experience?
Yeah, I think as an adult, it hits completely different than
Hmm.
it would hit as a kid. Because
Oh,
there
for
are
sure.
moments I've heard about my whole nerd existence. Like Phil was telling me the other day about a person running around Dragon Con years ago with a horse head, and they were dressed as a Atreyu, and they would just throw the horse head on the ground and cry. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, I am unsure what this is about. I didn't have that connection with the movie,
Hmm.
so I definitely understand watching it as a kid is going to have a different impact as an adult. As an adult, I did not enjoy it. I did not have a great time with this movie, but I can say I didn't enjoy it, would never watch it again, and would never have my son watch it, while also saying that I enjoyed the puppetry and the technical effects. The whole movie, it's an incredible thing to see, but
Hmm.
it's definitely a movie where I look at it and go, "You're never talking to me or my son ever again. You're no longer allowed in the house." But it had a lot to appreciate,
Hmm.
despite me not enjoying it. Does that's a fair? That's probably the best assessment I can give it.
That and so it's interesting to me how that plays out because I wonder had you seen it in your youth and gotten through it, if you would think differently about it now or not, or if it just never was going to connect with you and we're just seeing that here because it is
Yeah.
very much like there's layers to this, not just in the
Mhm.
narrative, which we'll kind of get to because there's some fun stuff that like you definitely don't pick up on as a kid, but
Right.
um there's also layers to the story in terms of like what it's saying. So this is actually based on a book. And the novel, The Neverending Story, was written by a German author. Let me find his name, Michael. Uh, I'm going to go with Enda. I'm
Mhm.
sure pronunciation is probably different than that, but that was the novel. He wrote that in 1979, and it was
Oh
translated to
wow.
English, and then it was then it got optioned and made. He famously hated the movie. Um,
Really?
Absolutely despised. Actually went to court over this movie, trying to get it stopped from being made. Um, so he was initially involved in the script for it and adapting it, but um, he didn't like the direction they were going in. So the movie takes place, and it is roughly half the book. It's the first half of the
Oh.
novel, is what we get in the movie. There's a whole second half. I'll get to that here shortly, but um, he didn't like a couple of changes to the story, and specifically the ending where Bastian comes back into the real world with Falcor. He hated that because it was completely
Mhm.
different from the whole idea of what he was trying to go for in the novel. And so he ended up wanting his name taken off of it, and then he sued and tried to get them to stop making it, and Warner Brothers was like, no. And so he just disassociated and just did not like it at all. He didn't like
Right.
um, the changing of it because basically what we got in this is half the book where Bastian. So the for those who haven't seen it, we're going to spoil the hell out of it. But the story involves a young kid, Bastian, who in the book is a little less likable and a little, but he's still like just kind of this put upon kid. Um, but he finds a book, which I love that scene. I love the scene in the bookstore with the old man
Yeah.
because it's that classic trope of like, I'm going to tell the kid you don't want this. It's not for you, knowing full well what he's
Mhm.
doing. Um,
Oh
But
yeah, it's the wise old sage
yeah,
trope. This kid runs into store, library, bowling alley, whatever. finds old man doing thing,
hmm
learns things, goes on adventure. I
yeah,
love that trope. I wrote a short story with that trope in it once because I'm such a
nice.
big fan of it. I have nothing against it. It
Yeah, it's a
works
good
for me.
trope. But he
Yeah.
finds the book, takes it back to school, rather than so he's having trouble at school. He's lost his mother. His mother recently passed away, and he's having nightmares. He's having trouble at school. He's not getting schoolwork done. Um, I found it interesting too. Gerald McRaney plays his dad.
Hmm.
We talked about him on Simon and Simon not a while back. I had completely 100% forgotten that he was the dad in this, and
Yeah.
um, he's in one scene and then just never comes up again. Like the movie's not interested in telling us any more about Bastian's life in the real world. Um,
But that's a pivotal scene.
it is
Like
a very
really you
pivotal
can't
scene.
you can't have the story without the scene with the dad because it's time to toughen up, the world goes on, we have things to
Yep.
do. Uh dad, which sets the stage for why this kid is going to read this book and why he's so hit by it and why it means so much to him.
hmm
I think it's a short 5 minutes, maybe less, but it does so much for the whole story. It's
Oh, it
not a it's yeah.
yeah, it really does. Also, this time watching it, I couldn't help but focus on what he was making in the blender, which was basically orange juice and eggs blended together. And
Yes.
I don't I don't understand that, but whatever. It's fine. It's the 80s. I'm pretty sure.
I was focused on the kitchen and the cabinetry, and I could smell that room.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. It was that wonderful color. The you could smell the formica. I'm pretty sure we owned that exact blender when I was a kid. Um,
Yes. Yeah, it
he
smells
had
like
the
smoke and old lady.
Yep, and they had the stick of butter. It's like the 1 pound block of butter instead of 4 individual sticks, um,
Yep.
which was great. So so his dad's telling him this, and Bastian's been like drawing unicorns in his math book or horses. He has to correct his dad. They're unicorns, dad.
Oh yeah, they're
Um,
unicorns.
not taking his schoolwork seriously and all of that. Didn't try out for the swimming team, which seemed like a strange fixation by his dad. I guess maybe his dad was a swimmer. I don't know.
Well, they go into that in Neverending Story Part 2, don't they? Isn't he like the swim team's a thing for him then?
Yeah, they might. I honestly don't
Yeah.
remember either of the sequels to this movie at
Okay,
all,
that's fine.
which not hurting anything. But
No.
so on it, so he leaves. He goes to on his way to school. He gets attacked by some bullies just on the street. They dump him in a dumpster, and then he gets out of that, and they just chase him again. Like they're just bullies for the sake of being bullies. It's fine, whatever.
Yeah.
They're one step above or below like a Stephen King bully in that way, where it's
Yeah.
just like they just
I've
exist
always
to be the bully.
Yeah. I've always loved the idea that you're being chased by bullies and you run down a completely empty alleyway
hmm
as your means of escape.
Right.
Like there's
Yes.
adults literally everywhere, and you run down the empty alleyway and go, "I
Yes.
should. This will get me out of it." It's the effect
Perfect.
of. It's the same as running up the stairs in a horror movie. Like,
Yes.
what are we doing here?
Right. So he gets the book we talked about, and then he goes to his
Yeah.
school. But instead of going to his class, they're having a math test. So he's already late anyway. So he dips out of there
Mhm.
and finds the key for the attic of the school. It's just
Yeah.
I guess like the easiest to access attic of any school I've ever seen.
I
Um,
also could smell the school when he was running down the hallway.
oh,
There was a
that's
lot of
cool.
smells coming through for
It was
me.
pretty good.
Yeah.
That attic too. That attic was musty. You know it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Dusty. It's interesting. I did like it was a very small thing, but I liked him putting the key in, getting into that door, and going in, and then realizing, oh, I left the key, and coming back out,
Hmm.
grabbing that to close the door so nobody can find him. Um,
Right.
which is interesting that nobody ends up looking for
Nobody
him, even though
bothered.
there's screaming later on, and nobody went to
Oh
look.
yeah, screaming, storms, power outages. No one seems to care where
Nope.
Bastion is.
So he starts reading the book, and we go into the world of the book, and this is where all of our puppets and everything start to show up. And
Hmm.
I loved all of the look of everything. I loved I think it's Teeny Weeny is the character played by Deep Roy.
Yes, played by Deep Roy. I saw him and I was like, "Is that Deep Roy?"
Hmm.
Because I'm a big Tim Burton fan, and he
Yeah.
started working with him, Big Fish, maybe sooner. But I'm looking at Deep Roy, going, "That's not Deep Roy. It couldn't be. He's too old there." Nope, he just lives forever. He's the
Yes.
same Deep Roy. I also thought he was too tall. Like I was like, that guy looks taller than the Deep Roy we know now. Definitely not his voice. Also,
No, no, not his
um,
voice. In fact, they
and
dubbed his voice. They dubbed the Night Hob, the other character's voice, was
mhm.
dubbed, and even Atreyu's voice was dubbed. Um,
And Travis, the funny thing is, I think that's what threw me off the most as a kid watching this, and why I couldn't get through it. The voices didn't match the words, and it made me crazy. Like their lips, the voices didn't match the
yeah.
lips, nor the character. In some cases, I'm like, that's not what that guy sounds like. And I'm that nitpicky of a kid when I was young, and
Hmm.
today that bothered me to a degree. It's almost like when you're trying to talk and you can hear yourself back, and it
Yeah.
just messes with your head.
Hmm.
It kinda had that, from a visual perspective. Like, as soon as they started talking, I remembered why I didn't like it, why I couldn't enjoy the movie. I think this is part of it.
Because obviously, with a puppet, you can get away with a little more. There's a lot more
Yeah.
leeway for the disconnect between the
Mhm.
voice and the image, and that's fine. But if it was just Deep Roy, you could maybe get away with it because he's not in the movie for that long. But it was so
Right.
many other characters too that they did that with for whatever reason, and that's what
Yeah.
we got. But we meet Teeny Weeny, we meet the Night Hob. I love Teeny Weeny's got his snail, and the Night Hob has his bat, and then in rolls the Rock Biter. Nearly runs
Yeah.
him over. The Rock Biter is, I think, my favorite of all of the like weird Fantasia characters. It's a
Mhm.
cool look, and I love the voice. I just love this idea of the Rock Biter and just like the whole characterization of him. He's just this gentle giant. Um, and I love like you wouldn't want that guy around because when he starts chewing on the rocks and it's just bits and pieces falling off those rocks everywhere, that's dangerous, man.
Chew with your mouth closed,
Right.
Rockbiter. Jeez.
Rockbiter, who was voiced by Alan Oppenheimer. Um, and if that
Yes.
name isn't familiar to you, you've heard his voice because he was the voice of Skeletor and Man at Arms and He Man and Masters of the Universe.
Oh, okay. I thought he was Robert Oppenheimer's, like, nephew.
Mm.
I was way off.
So Alan Oppenheimer had done, and I mean, Alan Oppenheimer did a ton of voice work in the 80s. But he was the voice of the Rockbiter in this. He was also the voice of Gamork, the wolf.
Oh,
He was the
wow.
voice of Falkor. And he was the voice of the narrator at the end. That was also Alan Oppenheimer. I've got some clips I'll play
Wow.
later because there was some good stuff. But we meet them. It's this story going on of the nothing. Like all these characters are coming
Yeah.
together because they're all heading to the ivory tower because their world is disappearing. It's just turning into nothing. You could easily have had like an Abbott and Costello routine go here. It wouldn't like I feel like correct me if I'm wrong. If this was
Yeah.
made like the Taika Waititi version of this has that kind of a thing going on. Like there was nothing. Well, so what was
Yes.
there? Nothing. Nothing was there. No, there was something. What's the something? Nothing. Like you could just have that. That would have been a joke that would
Yeah.
have gone
What's coming? Nothing. Well, then what are we all afraid of?
on.
Nothing. What are we doing? Yeah, it could go forever. I'm a fan of that version. And in my head canon, that's now in the movie. Thanks, Travis.
So yeah, so they are on their way there. They get to the ivory tower, and I love the scene there just because of the look of
Mhm.
all these weird creatures
Oh
and
man.
things all over the place. Like the beings with like multiple faces and all the
Yeah.
costume stuff in the background was just I just love that stuff. I love when things get weird for the sake of being weird. Um,
Yeah, it's otherworldly. And having gotten through, and I kind of knew what the point of the story was after a little bit. It didn't take too long to kind of pick up on what was going on.
mhm.
But like if you're going to imagine the fantasy realm of everybody's imagination,
Yep.
I mean, you would have the craziest stuff all
Oh yeah.
smashed together. Like
Yeah.
it works in the narrative for sure.
Yep. And so we learn that Fantasia is being consumed by the Nothing, and the Empress of Fantasia, who's the only one that can stop it, is dying. She's sick. There's some correlation between the two, so they need to send a great warrior from the tribe that hunts the purple buffalo, uh, a warrior named Atreyu, and that's when a young kid steps up and says, "Hi, I'm Atreyu," and they're like, "Haha, no, no, we need a warrior, not you." And
Yeah.
I do like him being like, "Well, fine, I'll just go back to hunting the purple buffalo." Like, okay. Meanwhile, everything's going to just disappear. But sure, sure, play that card. Why not? Um,
Yeah. Well, I'm offended. I'll just leave. How about
yeah.
that?
But he
I
was
also
sent
found
on
out
a.
this is where the band Atreyu got their name was
Yep.
from Atreyu in the Neverending Story. That was
Yeah.
cool to me. I was like, oh, that's where that. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So Atreyu is sent on the quest to find the cure for the Empress, and we get
Hmm.
some really gorgeous shots of him riding on his horse Artax all over the
Oh
place.
yeah, the montage.
Hmm. Yeah,
Can I
we
can I
get
take a
we get
second
a
to
couple of those.
appreciate this movie dropping you just right into the struggle? Like there's no exposition. There's no this is what the world is, where it came
Hmm.
from, who lives there, what factions exist. I've been wrestling with some a couple fantasy books in the past that have just expositioned themselves to death. Where you're just like, I can't consume enough of this backstory to even get to the point. So I
Yeah,
just appreciate them just going, F it. It's here. If you get it, good. If you don't, catch up.
and I
It's
think
awesome.
it that's a fine line to walk, right? Because you need
Yeah, oh, for sure.
some connection to the world. You need to know something of what's going on, but you don't want to go too far. Like Dune, I love Dune, but you have to be
Hmm.
ready to learn an entire history lesson in Dune in order to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Same thing with like Lord of the Rings is fantastic. Tolkien really made sure you knew all of what was going on in Middle Earth, and
Yeah.
who everyone was. And I do like that. And when it's done well, it can work, but it can be very tiring. So,
It's yeah. There's really bad examples. I won't go into them. Dune is a good example of picking out what you need to know and showing you quietly what is optional.
mhm,
Like
yes.
Easter eggs for people. Because I've watched Dune, enjoyed the crap out of it. I've never read Dune. I don't know the history, but I
Mhm.
have a friend who has. And when he said, "Oh, do you know why a dude's eyes changed at that one moment or whatever?" and he explained it to me, and I'm like, "Oh, that's neat." But it never took away from the story. Like I
Yeah.
think that exposition's tricky, and you just got to know when you need it and when you can get by without it, or if you could show it visually subtly without
Mhm.
really saying it out loud. That's the
Film
trick.
film is a visual medium, right? And you need to
Yes.
show, not tell. Like one of the things, the first John Wick, what made that movie work so well for me, aside from the fact that the action is just insanely good, is
Yeah.
it did so much world building without the need for these giant exposition dumps. We didn't need somebody to explain to us why he had a chest full of gold coins buried in his basement and why
Hmm.
this would happen or that would happen. They would just have it happen, and organically you could figure it out. And
Yeah.
that's how you tell stories this way. Like a book, the book of Dune is going to explain everything for you because it's a written word. It needs
It
that.
has to. Yeah.
Um, but it's the Lord of the Rings is another case though, where the movie did so much of the explanation stuff that Tolkien had baked in and put into the background of a
Yeah.
lot of things that it didn't need the exposition. That's one that didn't do it well. I'm trying to think of is like the first cut of Blade Runner where they have the voiceover
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
is, oh well, people aren't going to understand what this is, so we need to put a voiceover in there. And
Yeah.
another one is Dark City. I don't know if you ever saw Dark City or not, but
I have never seen Dark City, Travis.
I've done that for the show before,
Yeah.
but it's definitely worth finding. But if you watch it, find the director's cut and watch that because the original theatrical cut got the same thing, got a voiceover put into it, and it gave away
Hmm.
certain plot points right at the beginning of the movie, ruining some of the mystery, but also just over
Yeah.
explaining stuff. Whereas the director's cut of it gives you little crumbs and Easter eggs, and you figure it out as you go. And it trusted the audience to be able to do that, and
Yeah,
I
you can
I
put it
appreciate
together by
that.
the end.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like I had the biggest issue with Aquaman because it had three expositions that were not just expositions; they were flashbacks.
Yeah.
At part Act One, Act Two, Act Three all had their own separate exposition story. It drove me crazy. But you got like other people like Robert Zemeckis. You watch Back to the Future and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. There's some visual storytelling in there
Oh yeah.
that's just in like slow pans and stuff that you're like, oh, and it plays in later. It matters.
Yep.
Skateboard hitting the crate of plutonium. Oh, Doc stole the plutonium. Like
Yeah.
while the newsreel is going. And then panning across Eddie Valiant's desk and showing him as a clown with his dad. That's why he can do somersaults at the end of the movie without even thinking about it. Like there's so much there
Yeah.
that you can do visually. And just I've always referenced Home Alone as being just a masterpiece in
Hmm.
putting together a plot in the first 10 minutes of a movie.
Oh yeah.
Masterfully done.
That one.
All the things they do.
It's just like, I mean, Edgar Wright does it in all of his movies. He's
Oh
so good
yeah.
at placing all that stuff in there, and that those are
Hmm.
good visual storytellers. Good directors are able to pull that off.
Wonderful.
Um, and Wolfgang Peterson, who directed this,
Hmm.
I like him. I liked
Yeah.
his stuff. He made this coming off of making Das Boot. That was his previous
Oh
movie.
wow.
But you look at what he did in this stretch. Now his movies had middling reviews, and it's sort of, and like box office wasn't great, but I always thought he made really solid stuff from Das Boot. So he goes from that to this,
Hmm.
and then from Das Boot, Neverending Story, he did the Enemy Mine movie with Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid in the 80s.
Hmm.
In the Line of Fire, Air Force One.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't
Outbreak.
mind. Outbreak was another one. Troy, I liked Troy. It wasn't perfect, but
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
I'm
And then
glad you liked it.
he did a remake of Poseidon as well. And
Poseidon was good. I was into that movie. Yeah,
so
he's got he knows what he's doing.
yeah, he's a solid director. He also got some help on this movie from Steven Spielberg. So
Yeah.
because this was his first English movie, English language film,
Hmm.
was this. And he got, Spielberg was a friend of his and kind of helped him trim the fat a little bit, cut about
Yeah.
7 minutes down, and just punch it up, shape it up a little bit, to put this movie out. But yeah, so we learn all this about, and then Treyu goes off on his quest, and then um, this is where we get to the traumatic moment, or one of the most traumatic moments in the movie as a kid, and the one that stuck with everybody, and that's the swamps of sadness.
Right.
Um, and it's the swamps of sadness. And the thing about it is, like, you know how this is. Good shortcut for anything is something that happens to animals, um,
Right.
because they typically are thought of as being very innocent, and we don't assign a ton of morality to an animal. Um, and if you ever do, like, it's Cujo, right, where he's got rabies, and he's kind of,
Yes.
it's not like his control sort of thing. I don't. It's interesting, but like, that's a quick way to get your audience to care, is to do something to an animal. And in this case, it's Artax, the horse, who just, because
Hmm.
the swamps of sadness, like, here again is that fantasy world, right, where this
Yeah.
almost feels like something pulled right out of the Princess Bride, or the Princess Bride would have used this kind of an idea.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
or parodied it, which I guess they kind of do. Anyway,
They
like,
kind of do. Yeah. This has some DNA storytelling that the Princess Bride used, but obviously with a very different goal in mind.
oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, Artax sinking into the swamp of sadness is just horrific. It really is.
Hmm.
And now you can kind of understand those memes a little bit better, having at least seen
Yeah.
it. Probably didn't have the
Yeah.
same
I
impact
can.
on you as a grown adult.
Right, and that's what I was gonna say is like to a kid, I could see this obliterating you because all you need as a kid to care about something is to think it's beautiful, sweet, innocent, wonderful. Like that's all you need. But as much as it's been built up my whole life, this scene,
Mhm.
all I thought was like, wait, this happens in the first 15 minutes of the movie? Like we don't I thought like Artax had been through some crap with me, to make it feel because like as an adult, you need to build that relationship
Yep.
with the people on the screen. It needs time. It needs to be nourished. It needs to be given reasons to care. Um, and I didn't have that with Artax in the first 10 minutes.
Sure.
Um, and I thought that was kind of unfortunate because I'm like, if we beat, I had it set like I don't know if you played Red Dead Redemption 2, but friends of mine have. But
Yep.
spoiler alert, it's been out for years. Uh, Stuff happens to your horse, but you've been on this journey with this horse for hours.
Hmm.
You've done everything with this horse for hours, and it's like I cried then. But Neverending Story, it didn't pull tears. And I was kind of bummed out. I'm not gonna lie. I watch movies to feel.
Hmm.
And I felt like it happened all so quick. I had to really seek for it. I had to be like, okay, I'm Atreyu, and this horse has been my companion forever. And he's not just sinking because the swamp is dense. He's sinking because of hopelessness. Right? That's why
Hmm.
the horse is going down. He
Yep.
knows the nothing's coming just like Atreyu does.
Yep.
And he sees it as hopeless and he can't get out of there. And that to me, the symbolism in that hurts worse than the horse going down. Like the idea that this is your dreams and your hopes
Yeah.
fading
Hmm.
is probably something that an adult could take away, but I had to work for it. I had to think myself into it.
Yeah, and I think the reason why it stuck with those of us that saw it as a kid is as a kid, it's just a traumatic scene because of how Atreyu
Yeah.
reacts to it. His
Right.
reaction is what gives us the connection to Artax, and the fact that Artax just can't just just gives up, just can't do anything about it. And it happens off screen too. So we're seeing the horse
Yeah.
go down, and it's the cut back and forth, and then cut away, come back, and there's just that shot of the empty like swamp area. Um, and then as you get like that sticks with you, and then as you get older is when for me it transitions from the shock of the moment of the scene to realizing what it is symbolizing and coming to the conclusion you had there, which is the hopelessness. And that's the reason that Artax sunk, was because
Mhm.
he gave up because he knew that nothing was coming. And Atreyu, being Atreyu and not wanting to give up and wanting to fix things, lost his best friend. So
Mhm.
that's how it kind of played out for me. But it's interesting to hear because I kind of had that feeling. I had the feeling like, all right, it's going to hit, but probably not nearly as strong as it would have because you just don't have that connection to it. Now, you mentioned not wanting to show this to Sam. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, do you think he would take away from that scene what you did, or do you think it would hit him just because like the horse sinking and again the way Atreyu is acting during that really informs how you're going to feel
Yeah.
in that scene.
Sam when watching movies, he's a softie like me.
Hmm.
So he gets really bent out of shape when animals are in danger and when people who seem like nice guys are in danger. He gets real mad. He wants to know that guy seems like a nice guy. He's not going to get hurt, is he? Like that's his biggest concern. And I was the same way. I remember the trailer for the first God or for the Godzilla Matthew Broderick version had this old man running from Godzilla off a pier
Oh
when he
yeah,
was
yep.
fishing. That
Hmm.
wrecked me. I was like, he's just an old man fishing. What are we doing? So Sam has that same uh whatever that is in your genes that tells you like innocent people should be safe. So yeah, I think he would want to turn the movie off or fast forward it. Like he fast forwards. We watched Spider-Man No Way Home for like the fifth time the other day, and he
Hmm.
fast forward through the Aunt May scene, and his thing is
Hmm.
like, it's just a stupid scene, but I know it tears him up because
Oh
it's
yeah,
super
yeah.
emotional, and he doesn't he gets uncomfortable like any kid would.
Fair. No, it makes perfect
Yeah,
sense. I think too, like part of what made that scene stick with me so much is it's not only is it an animal that this is happening to, but it's not a puppet animal.
yeah,
It's not a puppeted character in the movie, which would have a different level of emotion to it because the puppets in this, I mean, they
oh yeah,
emote, and you feel
sure.
for them. But because it's not a puppet and it is just a straight up animal, which apparently, and I haven't read the book, so I did not know this until recently. In the book, Artax can talk,
Oh wow, okay.
which I think would have completely changed that scene. Um, it's 10 times worse that the horse can't talk because all you can go by are the reactions of it. But I think that's the other part of it is like it is an animal who can't really do anything.
Mhm.
So, there's that part of it too. But Atreyu does eventually get out of the swamp of sadness and find what was that character's name? The giant turtle, which I love the giant turtle just because
Yeah,
giant
I
turtle.
just called it giant turtle in my notes.
Um
Ancient one. The
yeah,
ancient
the
one.
the ancient one. Morla. Morla, the
Morla,
ancient
that's it.
one. Um I I will say this was a scene that I had completely forgotten about. It's been quite a while since I'd watched this movie. And for whatever reason I'd forgotten about this scene. I loved this because like
Mhm.
there is something I really dig about that kind of character, that tropey character of the ancient being that is just completely apathetic at this point. Just doesn't care anymore.
Yes.
Because why? Why would Morla care? Morla's been around
Right.
forever, even to the point of like Atreyu being like, well, yeah, but if the nothing comes, you'll die. And Morla's like, there'd at least be something happening.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
that's
a
rough.
different form of nothingness that Morla is dealing with. It's
Hmm.
almost like the fantasy world exists, but it hasn't used her for anything
Yeah.
in millennia. So it's like at least if it goes away, something has happened
Hmm.
to me. When you equate Fantasia to being like all human fantasy, kind of makes you even sadder. You're like, no one had need of a giant turtle to do stuff
I don't know
ever.
why. I mean, it's turtles all the way down. Um,
Yeah.
So, but
Ah.
I love that, and again, I liked the puppet for Morla.
Mhm.
The voice work was great. I love the idea of being allergic to youth. That's why Morla keeps
Yes.
sneezing. It was really fun, but just this
That was
idea of
really
like,
good.
oh, we'll go and talk to the ancient one, and then you get there, and the ancient one's just like, whatever. I don't care. I can't help you. I don't want to help you.
Yeah.
Um,
Not that it matters, but yes. I like
yeah,
that she said that a bunch of times. Also, there's a scene in the middle of this where Bastion just screams, but it didn't seem placed well. Like, what was that
yeah.
all about?
So
I was
I
wondering if you had
actually
some.
Yeah, I had a little bit on that. So there were two book scenes that were written originally in the script, and then they scrapped them because of budgetary stuff and timing and all of that. Um,
Mhm.
and one of them was the initial appearance of Falcor, where Atreyu rescues Falcor from um, was it Ygrumi Yggdrasil
Yeah.
the Many, which is a swarm of poisonous wasps that take the form of a giant spider, as one does.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and this is
Sounds
where
expensive.
Bastion's yeah, like that was just gonna be hard to do, right? But
Yeah.
this is where Bastion's scream being heard by the characters in the book was to have taken place. Was when Atreyu is dealing with the swarm of wasps, getting Falcor, Bastion gets freaked out by that, screams, they hear it. That's where that was supposed to happen. But they had to keep that scream in there somehow. But they cut that scene. So this was I guess the shock of seeing a giant turtle. I don't know. You're right. It does feel out of place.
It's
Um,
remarkably out of place because it's not even like a "whoa" scream. It's more like a "ah!" Like I'm just like, what? What? Why are we mad? What just happened? I'm glad that you were able to shed some light on it because I wrote it in my notes. I was like, what is that all about?
because I love the meta nature of like them hearing that and
Sure.
Atreyu reacting to it, and Morla kind of not. Like Morla is like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a thing that happened, but whatever. Moving on. There's also remnants of that deleted scene or that cut from the script scene where Atreyu and Falcor are with the gnomes and getting treated. That's why like the
Hmm.
gnome is giving a shot to Falcor at one point. She's treating
Yeah.
him for wounds. That was kind of a leftover of he had that battle with uh Igramil the Many. So
Okay.
or
That makes
Igramul.
sense then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I like that. That works.
Uh
This was also the first time we got the idea that what Sebastian was doing at all could be impacting the book. I think this was that
yeah.
first moment. So I get why it's important. It's just we couldn't just drag him back to the attic real quick and have him rail a different way in
Yeah.
post.
It was
Like we
something.
ran
It
out of
was
money.
just Yeah, it was like, we'll just do this. It'll be fine. No one will notice. And
Sure.
I
Yeah.
mean,
No one
for
will
the most
care.
part, it
It's a
works.
kids
But
movie.
right.
Oh yeah.
Um, so leaving Morla, Atreyu is still in the swamps, and now we've got Gamork, the wolf, who's been
Oh yeah.
dispatched to kill Atreyu. Gamork scared the hell out of me as a kid.
He's terrifying. He scared me now.
Um, and just as Gamork is about to get Atreyu, he's rescued by Falkor, our luck dragon, who
Mhm.
has kind of a dog-looking face, but definitely is a dragon. Um, and Falkor swoops in, grabs him, and they fly away. So it's a very different meeting here than in the book. Um, but Falkor takes him, and that's where they end up with the gnomes. I loved that whole thing. Falkor is great. How much do you want your own Falkor? I mean,
Yeah.
just to have a luck dragon that you could ride around on, how great would that be?
Yeah. I'd even
Um,
take like a small golden retriever size luck dragon just to curl
sure,
up at the bottom of the bed,
there
you
you
know?
go. I'd like that. I did love him getting the itch on his ear. So, like, even luck dragons want scritches. It's great. Can't
That is
quite reach them.
definitely the character that charms the children. Like if you want a
Hmm.
kids movie and you want it to work, you got to have the charming character, and the endlessly optimistic Falcor
Hmm.
is definitely doing the job here.
Oh yeah. So this is where the movie starts to get a little bit more meta because the gnomes are treating Atreyu for his wounds. He gets better, and now he's got to go through. He's got two gates to get through to get to the Empress. Um, and I I loved the scene of the gnome and Atreyu on top of the building looking through the telescope at the gateway from the technical aspect of it because it's
Yeah.
all a composite shot and it looks like they completely sell it. That visual is
Oh yeah.
perfect. And it's not like it's the first time that's ever been done in a movie, but to do that, like, it just looks flawless. I can't find the flaws in it. And it's really, really good. So I just love stuff like that. Um,
Yeah, I was super into it. It looked great. I actually didn't notice. I didn't notice the effect.
mhm,
It was
yeah,
good enough that I just totally believed it. It didn't bother me one bit.
yep. I love the trope of like, you're going to have to go through that thing. Oh, look, somebody's about to use it and they're going to fail. So we can see what happens when you fail. Like, that's
Yes.
great.
Hmm.
Just a big knight in armor and he gets blasted by the Sphinx. There's two of them. And
Yeah.
that happens
The
right
two
in front
very
of
well
Atreyu.
endowed sphinxes.
Yes. Yes. This movie liked to show off the Sphinx boobies, for sure.
Yes, it did.
Um, but I also love that Atreyu sees this happen right in front of him through that telescope or whatever. And his reaction is like, I could do that.
You're right.
And the whole thing is based
Mhm.
around if you start to doubt yourself, which he's already gone through, like the swamp of sadness and all this terrible stuff. And if you doubt yourself, those things just blast you to kingdom come. But he's like, nah, I
Yeah.
got this. And just takes off while the gnome is like, hold on, you don't know about the next one. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So so he goes.
That's another trope is the I was about to tell you something and then this happened or you
Yep.
left
Yes.
kind of thing.
So you didn't get all the information.
Yep.
So Atreyu goes and he does get through it somewhat with the help of Bastion, by the way. He kind of yelling at him
Mhm.
to run. So he gets past the Sphinx. Is Sphinxes? We'll go with
A
Sphinxes.
sphinx eye.
There we go.
Sure.
Either one. The boobs. There's lots of boobs, and he got
Yeah.
past them. Um,
They definitely need some support. It is at that point I paused the movie, I took a picture of it and sent to Stephanie, who was not watching it with me. I was like, "What am I watching?" She says they're trying to sun their tan lines. It's like, I guess so.
yep. So he gets through that, and then we learn that the second gate he's going to have to get through is the mirror of self-reflection, or whatever they call it. And you see
Yeah,
like
this was
your
cool.
true self. Um, and this is where the movie really got meta, and I dug this too, just
Yeah.
because Atreyu's walking up to it, and then we slowly see the reflection changing to Bastion reading the book, and have that moment of what the hell from him. Like, well, wait a second, because he's reading a book about himself, about how he's in the book. Like, he flipping out. Atreyu doesn't know what the
Yeah.
hell is going on. Um, and then we kind of hand wave past it. We're just like, okay,
Yeah.
that happened, and now he's in seeing the Empress. Sure.
This is again a very kids movie thing where
Hmm.
kids they just accept the world they're seeing because they don't have enough life experience to judge it any different way. They just go, well,
Sure.
it's just what happens when you read this book.
Yeah.
Okay. It's unfazed.
So Atreyu gets in. He finds the Empress. We meet the childlike Empress, who was played by Tammy Stronach. This was her first film role. Um, she basically did this and then didn't act in film for like 24 years
Oh wow.
because she had no desire and her parents had no desire for her to be a child star or child actor in film. So she did some theater and she also did a lot of dance. And
Yeah.
that was what
Probably
she
a
did.
good
And then,
move. It was the 80s.
yeah. And she ended up going back into film acting like 2017. I think she's done a few things since then. But this was the first thing that she did. So Atreyu runs into her, and yeah, she's dying. She's sick. Turns out she already knew what the cure was for her that they sent Atreyu out to find, and it was she needs a name. She needs a new name
Mhm.
from a human boy. And I did like Atreyu's reactions to that, like, what the hell have I been doing all this for then? If you already knew that.
Yeah.
But it turns out, because we're diving even deeper down the meta rabbit hole, um, that he needed to do all that in order to pull in the human boy because the human boy is reading the book.
Yeah.
And she knew that, and I had completely forgotten. Like I knew that part of it, but I had forgotten about her mentioning, like, yes, and people are watching him read the book. And it's like,
Oh
oh,
wow. Yeah, that kind of went over my head then.
yeah, like we went meta and then it went extra meta because um she starts talking about how Bastion is reading the book, but there's an odd, like they pull us in there's people watching him read the book of what's going on here, sort of that. And then there's that never-ending cycle in a
Yeah.
way.
Well, did all this happen after or before the Gamork when he actually met and got attacked by the Gamork? Did we jump ahead?
We might have,
Because I feel like he fought the Gamork
yeah,
and then the Nothing came, wiped out everything, and then he rode Falcor back to the Ivory Tower,
that's
and she
right,
was in
because
there.
after the mirror, Falcor and him like go flying around, and that
They
was the
flew.
other.
Yeah, it was another montage.
It was another montage, and that was the other deleted scene, which was in the book. There was a bunch of wind giants. They're basically clouds that fight, and that's what causes Atreyu to get knocked off of Falcor. And in the
Oh,
movie, they
okay.
didn't
Yeah,
really
and he
have the
landed at
budget
the
for that,
beach.
and so they just sort of like the Nothing knocked him off of there, and he's at the beach. So you're right, I did miss that
Yeah.
part because that was
Yeah, because he wanted
another.
to. He needed to get to the boundaries of Fantasia. And
Yes,
that, like, out to the outer boundaries of Fantasia was what the Southern Oracle told him to do.
yes, and so
Yeah.
that's where he runs into he finds these ruins, and they've got the
Mhm.
murals of like his travels and his adventures going on, and that's where Gamork is there.
Yeah.
And that scene again, Gamork, terrifying, and that whole scene
Oh,
was great. I captured a little bit of that because so I got audio, and I want to play some of this
yeah.
audio because some of this makes works here. Like, so in this particular scene, he's looking around. He sees the mural of like him and Artax, and he sees the mural of him, and then he sees the mural that shows Gamork, and turns around, and there's Gamork right there.
Yeah.
Which I'd have pooped myself if I was Atreyu.
It was
Just
so scary, dude.
just would
That
have.
wolf is something else.
And it was a great like it's a great puppet. Sure, it looks like a puppet, and the way that it
Yeah.
moves is very much a puppet, but I also am fine with that because again, it's a fantasy world. I don't need it to be
Mhm.
photorealistic. I actually kind of like it the way that it is. Um,
And it's horrifying all by its like as a
yeah.
puppet.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's still flipping scary. If I made that thing, I'd be like, that has to sit somewhere not where I'm sleeping. We're
Yeah.
gonna put that
I,
in the
especially the
workshop.
glowing eyes. You don't want to wake up in the middle of the night and
Yeah.
just see those glowing eyes.
Yeah.
But then, like, Atreyu looks at him, and the first thing it says is,
If you come any closer, I will rip you to shreds.
like,
That's horrifying. You're a kid watching this movie?
Yeah.
Like, no wonder everyone's scared to death. Like,
Hmm.
that is like, what?
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. It gives me chills even thinking about it now. And this is where again we're piling the meta on. Now we learn that Fantasia is the fantasy world of all the human world because
Right. Yeah.
Atreyu's got to find a human child from beyond the borders of Fantasia. So that's what he went out looking for. And Gamork is like, yeah, there are no borders. You're not going to leave the borders of Fantasia. There aren't any because this is just the fantasy world of humans.
Yeah.
Um, which I think is what I captured here. I'm going to play this.
It's the world of human fantasy.
I like the way he
Mhm.
said that. And Gamork was working for the power behind the nothing, which was kind of
Right.
weird and cryptic. And he was doing that
It seems to
because
me that it
go
was
ahead.
kind of indicative that it was like the grown-ups. It's kind of that stage that's said at the beginning where the dad going, "Got to keep our feet on the ground."
Yeah.
Like it's almost like Gamork is working for the adults who want the kids to get serious
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
they need to be.
Right. And move away from childish things and
Right.
imagination and fantasy, and join the real world. Um, and I love this line from Gamork.
Because people who have no hopes are easy to control.
That's real good. Um,
Yeah.
so Atreyu's learning all this, and then Gamork attacks him. Atreyu grabs like a shard, some piece of whatever, and he attacks him. And it's over with quickly. We don't see it really happen. I'm sure that was a budgetary thing. They just didn't have it wasn't going to look good, and they didn't really have the budget
No.
to make that fight. But I also don't really mind because from a narrative standpoint, he's not he is but also isn't the antagonist.
Mhm.
So just to have it like Atreyu has confronted him and Atreyu beats him and moves on. It's fine. He learned what
Yeah.
he needed to learn from that situation, and that was it. But there's a lot of blood too for again kids movie, um, and we're showing him like stabbing the wolf, and there's all the blood on the hands and everything. Like it's pretty
Yeah,
rough.
he clearly the Gamork winged him, because
Yeah.
he's
Oh yeah.
got a slash across his chest. It's not super graphic, but it's there, and that you're right, that fight could have I think fights with humans versus wolves always looks kinda stupid, so, I think a cutaway there is probably not a bad choice.
Yeah. I think also I did read something that Noah Hathaway got slightly injured filming that because the puppet and the rig for it was real heavy, and when it like they
Yeah,
did a take and it kind of hit him in the face with one of the paws, and supposedly scratched his eye or something, but also landed on him. And they're like, you know what, we're just gonna not do another take with this thing because the kid might get hurt. We'll cut away from it. That's fine. So if
yeah,
that's true, that does make sense as well. But um so Atreyu now is he's kind of losing hope, and the nothing is tearing Fantasia apart. He gets back on Falcor, now they're just flying around in a void with like bits
yeah,
and pieces of what's left of Fantasia floating away because the nothing has just it's all disappearing. And they do make their way back to the tower. Like the tower is still there. Um, and when they get back to the tower and he finds the Empress, of course Atreyu's all sad, and uh, and that's when she tells him like, well, but I've known all along and this and that. And he's like, why are you sending me out looking for him? And she kind of has to be like, well, you had to do this in order to draw the kid in. Basically, the whole idea is like the book Fantasia exists because it's the fantasy world of the humans, but the book has to tell the story in order to draw you in to keep the fantasy alive. So
yeah,
it is self-fulfilling in that way. But she needs her name, and this is where like she starts to plead to Bastion directly as he's reading the
yeah.
book to give her a new name because he had said earlier, oh, I wish they would ask me. I'd give her my mom's name. My
Mhm.
mom had a wonderful name.
That's
Um,
right, yeah.
and so we're getting like the back and forth, and she the Empress like turns right to the camera and starts talking directly to the camera. Bastion's looking directly at the camera talking to her. It's very weird. which I love that kind of stuff. But and this is like the storm is raging outside to the school and all of that kind of stuff going on and all the lightning when he finally yells out the name. And were you able to hear the name that he was yelling?
Had no clue.
Okay.
I even had closed captions on, and it actually just says yelling. So
Really?
I'm not sure that it is an actual name. I think it's probably up for interpretation what he says.
Oh, that's crazy because something with my copy, I could very clearly hear it. And I
Oh,
remember,
really?
so my memory of it is what you experienced, which is like you hear yelling indistinct and you're not really sure what it is. But for some reason in the
Hmm.
copy that I had, you can clearly hear him yelling Moonchild.
Oh, wow.
That's the
Okay.
name he's yelling. So I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know what was different about my copy, but
I don't.
it
So
was
the version that you can rent on Prime, the closed captions just say yelling.
I like that, honestly. I prefer that. That was my memory of it. Was you don't really hear it; you just hear him yelling, something, and that's the name he gave her. Um, and then there's
Yeah.
the moment where she's got the single grain of sand. That's all that's left of Fantasia,
Yeah.
and she gives it to him, and he has the ability to wish it back into existence. And this is where, in the book that ends the first half, and then we get the whole second half, which is Bastian is in the land of Fantasia. So the movie ends, he goes back to the real world with Falcor. He
Hmm.
wishes Fantasia back into existence. All the characters come back. We see him go on a montage flying around with Falcor, which I would do. But we get to see the Rock Biter and Teeny Weeny and the Night Hawk, um, the Night Hob and all of that. Atreyu and Artax are back. Like everything is back.
Yeah.
And then he has one more wish, and he uses that to go back to the real world with Falcor and go after his bullies because absolutely 100%,
Yeah.
I get it.
Got to give him a what for.
Which is the thing that Michael Enda hated, absolutely hated that idea.
Yeah.
Here's
I
partly
don't
why.
love it.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. Go
Well,
for it.
yeah, so here's partly why. So in the book, Bastian stays in Fantasia, and he's able to use his wishes to bring things to life there, but every time he does that, he loses a memory of his real life, of the real world. So as he goes, he's losing more and more memories of who he was and what he was in the real world as he's in Fantasia. And from what I was reading, there was something to the effect of like he starts to get, um, he becomes friends with Atreyu and they spend a lot of time together. But then he starts to get like real overconfident in himself and actually tries to overthrow the Empress and rule Fantasia. So there's a whole second half of the story and what Michael Enda was going for that just doesn't exist in the book. And I think that's part of why he really hated the way it ended, because it left so much unresolved and it didn't
Yeah.
go the directions that he wanted, which is just very different. Um, but I'm curious. I kind of want to read the book, and there's been talks of doing a
Yeah.
remake. So this movie came out a few years later, 1990. They made a sequel. 1994, they made a third movie. Neither of those reviewed very well, especially the third one. The second one did okay box office wise worldwide, which this movie did too. It was made for about $27 million
Oh
at the
wow.
time,
1984 money. Yeah.
which at the time was the most expensive movie made outside of the US or the Soviet Union. It was a German production.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was somewhere like 50 million Deutschmarks at the time. Um, and it made around $100 million worldwide. So it made its money back. It was
Oh.
okay in the States, but it reviewed fairly well. Roger Ebert liked it. A bunch of critics did enjoy it. But then it got kind of a second wind on home video and cable TV, obviously. And that's where a lot of people saw it. Um, there's been talks of doing a remake as far back as I think like 10 or 12 years ago. Kathleen Kennedy was working on a remake. Um, but apparently the rights are real difficult. And
Okay.
some of that is Michael Enda passed away and his estate has the rights to everything. And I think that they're just
I guess Warner
probably,
Brothers would have lapsed since '94.
Yeah, I
and they
think
haven't
so.
done anything with it. Yeah.
So there's just like there's been talk of doing it. I do think that this could make a very interesting remake of either a movie or or like a 2 or 3 part series to do the
Yeah.
full story
Yeah, do
with
this as a
the
miniseries,
yeah.
like Prestige TV, Game of Thrones style. Just like make 12 good episodes a season
And
and do it. I'd watch that.
what would be interesting is I would want them to adapt the whole story,
Yeah.
including that second half that most people don't know about. What I worry is that too many people are going to be so attached to this version of it that they wouldn't be able to separate those, which is going to be tricky.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I feel like this is, if you're going to do it, this is the time that it can be done in. And if you go full bore for it,
Yeah, we're very accepting of fantasy right now as a people,
mhm,
as a nerddom. Like
yes,
we're all good with it, but you do run that risk of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory scenario
hmm
of hey, this movie's way closer to the book and everyone hates it.
yeah,
So like
yep,
what is going on? Like you could do that with this, but I'm like you, I would love to see them try. I think this story has a lot to like. And if it wasn't for some of the things that bothered me technically about the movie, like the really bad ADR,
hmm
um, and stuff like that, like I appreciate what was trying to be done, and I think there's something really good here. It's like I think the thing that throws me off, I don't want to harp on the dialogue and the way that it was recorded. But back then when you dubbed a movie, you just dubbed them in a sound room and none of the sound of the voice matched the room they were in.
yeah,
If that makes sense. Like it doesn't lose if you have him talking in a room with no walls, his voice shouldn't sound like he's projecting into a microphone. It should sound
yeah.
like it's dissipating in a valley, you know,
No,
and that's where bad
yeah,
dub gets me.
I agree with you 100%. Like the ADR work in this does feel, it feels like that was thought of late in the game.
Yeah.
And so it was just not able to be recorded and engineered the way that it should have been. Like they decided, oh, you know what, we're gonna dub Noah Hathaway with a different actor and not say anything about it because he's gone on to say like at conventions and stuff. He's like, yeah, that's not my voice. I didn't sound like that. And I don't have that
Wow.
accent. Um,
Yeah, there was
so
moments
it's
too where I felt like they couldn't decide whether they wanted Atreyu to have a British accent or not. Like it's like sometimes his R's were like hard R's and sometimes they were British R's.
yeah.
And I'm like, what is happening? Is he British or not? What are we doing?
Um, so a big change from the book, by the way, is in the book. Atreyu has green skin and blue hair, I think. Um,
Yeah, I read that.
and they tried that early on, and they're like, this doesn't work. It looked like
Right.
moss, they said, so or like fungus on him or something. So they just skipped that altogether. Um,
Good
that would be
move.
interesting how they would do that currently, right? Because if you did
Yeah.
that book accurate, are people going to hate that or not? You know.
Yeah, and sometimes you just don't do what the book says.
Hmm.
Sometimes you should because in a book you're not like you said earlier, a book you're reading everything that's happening and you're imagining it. And
Yeah.
movies are a different medium. I've argued this
Hmm.
with people over the course of my time being obsessed with movies and when they make decisions and people are like, "Well, that's not what it looks like in the comic book." I was like, "Have you looked at the comic book?" Like if they did that in a movie, it would look stupid. They've gotten much better at that recently. But like this, you talk about early 2000s, like if they'd made all the X-Men comic accurate in the 2000 version of X-Men, would have looked ridiculous. Because we didn't know what we were doing. We just been
Yeah.
like spandex all day, and it would have been gross. Um,
Oh,
so I
absolutely.
think
It's an
liberties are
adaptation.
necessary.
Yeah, it's always you're
Yeah, yeah,
adapting something to the medium that you're telling it in. So certain things
yeah.
just work better than others. I mean, you always see like people will do comparisons of, oh, here's what they looked like based on what the book says, and here is how they look in the film or television adaptation and how different it is. Like, well,
Hmm.
yeah, because it's not exactly the same thing, and you're going by your interpretation of words versus what human beings look like. Um,
Yeah. And people
so
forget costumers and stuff, man. They've got to think about color and how they're
yeah.
going to use it. They got to think
Hmm.
about patterns and how it's going to get caught on camera. Like I learned that from The Hobbit when they were doing the shooting the high frame rate versions of the Hobbit movies.
Oh yeah.
They're like, we had to work real hard to make Bilbo's robe not look stupid. Because it
Hmm.
just because of the frame rate difference. There's like technical bits for costuming that you just don't even think about as a regular moviegoer that has to
We
go into it. Like, how is that lens going to capture them when that light at that time?
yeah.
It's ridiculous.
We've talked about that before with like old black and white television. You and I have talked about that,
Hmm.
where like
Yeah.
you don't think about how crazy that would have looked in color because you're shooting it black.
Hmm.
When you shoot something black and white, it's different. It's not just
Yeah.
removing the color. You have to actually think about the values and all of that. So I'd just be
Hmm.
very interested to see this like readapted for a current. If they do though, I really want to make sure that a lot of stuff is done practically and then
Same.
visual effects enhanced.
Hmm.
Um, because and
It's so hard to talk a studio into practical effects these days because it's so expensive.
mhm,
Um, and CGI at this point there is considered cheap.
it
Um,
is, but they're getting better at being able to blend the two and work. Like we are seeing improvements in uh, overall visual effects fidelity. I think on the whole. Now
yeah.
there are poor versions of a lot of stuff, but usually what that ends up coming down to is time and money, where they're not given enough
Hmm.
time or budget to do what they need, and they're just we'll
Yeah.
fix it. It's sort of like an actor doing a poor accent or a performance that isn't 100% great. Like they probably weren't given enough time
Yeah.
to do that or to learn that dialect or learn that accent, but it was well you got to have that, and that doesn't always work. So same thing with visual effects. I mean, they're visual effects artists. They need time to figure that kind of stuff out. So my hope would be if they do ever make anything out of this again, that they do a nice blend of the two, and give us the
Who
practicals.
who comes to mind for you if you think of okay, a pilot episode of the Neverending Story is going to happen? It's going to be directed by somebody. Who's your pick?
You know who would be interesting to see do this is, um, and it'd take a while because they're working on the final season of it, but the Duffer Brothers from Stranger Things,
Oh,
I think would
that's
be
an
very
interesting choice.
interesting be-
Yeah.
because they have a
Okay.
good mix of the darkness and the dark side of stuff while also understanding sort of the fantasy elements and just like that balance between the two. So I would be very interested to see that because it would be I think this whole story does need to skew a little bit darker.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, that's the first name that came to mind was the Duffer Brothers for me.
Man, that's an inspired choice. It did not even pop into my head. Like that's a you should write Netflix a letter style choice and be like, you know what? They're from my area. I could probably find out how to get in touch. Like, hey, y'all working on Neverending Story? Because you should. That's
Every
good.
so often, I
I was
stumble
gonna,
into a good
yeah,
one.
yeah, that was really good. I was gonna say Del Toro, Guillermo del Toro,
Ooh,
just
I
because of
mean,
his creature work. He's so good. He's so good at
I
creatures and weird.
hmm I no, I honestly like you say that, and now I'm picturing that scene in the Ivory Tower where Chiron is giving the whole thing of like we gotta find Atreyu and this and that whole
Yeah.
scene from the mind of Del Toro is
Yeah.
grotesque and fascinating, and I want to see it. Like I
Right? It's
want
like
to see that.
the troll market from Hellboy 2. It's like
Yeah.
just anything that falls out of your brain, we're just gonna put it in that scene.
Oh,
That's what's
absolutely.
gonna happen. That's cool. Yeah. And with oh, what's his name? Ron Perlman as Falcor's voice.
Oh
I'm in.
yes. So speaking of Falcor's voice, as I
Yep.
mentioned, Alan Oppenheimer did the voice work for Falcor. I've already played a couple of his as Gamork, but his Falcor was great. Did you have
Yeah.
any clue that it was the same voice doing all these different
No
parts?
idea. When you said that at the beginning of the show, it blew my mind. I had no idea.
Because the same voice that scared us with,
If you come any closer, I will rip you to shreds.
all right, that voice also says,
I like children.
For breakfast?
Never.
like, that's
That's good.
great. And I of course, got the laugh because I always
You
do.
have to. It's such an old wizard laugh.
It really is. It really is. A lot of names getting tossed out, and people like, my name is or his name is. So I got.
My name is Falcor.
Also, that voice is the voice of Skeletor in He-Man and the Masters of the Universe from the 80s. Like, it's the same guy.
That's crazy.
Which is just hilarious to me. It's also the same voice of the rock biter, who I loved when he picks up the rock and he's looking at it and he's like explaining,
Nice bouquet.
Yeah, he's the
the
rock
gourmet rocks.
sommelier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Must be a real vintage year.
Have you ever seen a racing snail before?
I have not. Well, I did watch Turbo. I did have a small
Ah,
child.
that's true.
But yeah, no, never seen a snail move that fast.
Yeah.
Really is a racing snail.
And then he comes back, and this wasn't in the book, but man, that scene where Atreyu runs into the rock biter towards the end, and he's the only one left, is heart wrenching because of the performance, the hand, and just
They look like good, strong hands, don't they?
you can hear the despair in his voice right there. And I
Yeah.
use that, I quote that often. Anytime I
Oh,
do
wow.
something and I fail at it, it's like you fail at something. It's like they look like good, strong hands.
Wow. Yeah. When you put it in that context, that is a lot.
Yeah. So I mentioned we had Gerald McRaney as his dad, and I just thought it was an interesting thing for him, like a dad in the '80s, and it's
And I'm very disappointed that you didn't even try out for the swimming team.
with no other context. It's just the swimming team. That's his
Yeah.
thing. Thought that was kind of
Yeah.
funny.
He's got to do some sport. If you don't do a sport, you're not going to be liked. You got to be
Right?
liked so you can get places.
Also, the great fatherly advice that he gave.
Stop daydreaming. Start facing your problems.
I mean, yes, but also
Ugh.
don't stop daydreaming. Like, don't give
Right.
up that, which is a big
Well, yes, but actually, no.
right. And that's the big kind of takeaway from this movie, right? Is like you still need, because the movie is about like moving on from childhood into adulthood
Mhm.
after a traumatic experience, like losing your mother, is the underpinnings of it. But it's also kind of telling us, yeah, but don't let go of that fantasy. Don't let go of that imagination.
Well, yeah, I mean, to get philosophical about it, like we're all really good, and the one unique thing we have is to create, right? Like it
Mhm.
sets us apart from the animals. We can create, we can dream, we can make things, and the whole world tells you, well, you could make things, but you really need to make other people's dreams come true
Yeah.
if you want to survive. You just need to be a cog in the machine, and it's like it's like the one unique thing we get, and they're just like, no, actually, you need to go ahead and stop daydreaming, get yourself a real job.
Yeah, which is what makes Gamork's line of "you take away their hopes and they're easier to control" even hit harder. Like, it's
Yeah,
pretty.
this is a kids movie with incredible sage information in it.
Mhm.
Like it will
Yeah.
gives you a lot of wisdom it's throwing out.
And there is, of course, the old wise man in the bookstore.
This book is not for you.
It's not for you, which is code for
It
take the book.
definitely is. Yeah, go
Steal
ahead
the
and take
book.
it.
To Bastian's credit, though, he stole the book, but he did leave a note. Don't worry,
Oh
I'll
yeah.
bring it back. So he's conscientious.
Yeah, and I mean the bookkeeper knows that he name dropped like the best series is and
Mhm.
books ever, like right out the gate. He's like, oh yeah, he needs this.
Yeah.
Not just some
Oh yeah.
random kid.
Um, Also, so Alan Oppenheimer also recorded this line, which is the final line in the movie, and it's great because it's again the never-ending story, which is only 92 minutes long. So they got to give you something, and I liked the sort of well,
Bastion made many other wishes and had many other amazing adventures before he finally returned to the ordinary world. But that's another story.
that's another
And
story.
then we get that wonderful song again.
That song, which was a big hit, um, it was very popular, charted well, and got a resurgence thanks to Stranger Things a few years ago when they used it in season 3. And I did read that after that happened in Stranger Things, like Spotify said streams of that went up by like 400% or something.
Oh wow,
Like it was a
that's
huge
all right.
increase because of it showing up there. So that always
Now I'm
that
even
got
more
me.
convinced that you're on to something with this Duffer Brothers thing because I forgot they used that song in season 3.
um, I really like this line from the one gnome.
It has to hurt if it's to heal.
I don't know. There's just something
Let me
about
use
that.
that with my kid. Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
that's something every kid has heard.
Sure. Absolutely. And also, I love a movie that gives its own title as dialogue in the movie.
The Neverending Story? What's that?
It's the movie we're watching.
Yeah, we're about to find out.
Again, it can get very meta, and definitely did there. Um, the whole end of this is like it. It almost shouldn't work on paper. Like if you tried
Oh
explaining this
yeah,
to somebody, like just giving a plot breakdown of this and explaining it doesn't make any sense, but somehow it works. And I think it works because they draw you in to the world right away without a bunch of exposition. They're just like, here you are, have fun. And then
yeah.
you go through it all. So I don't know, maybe.
I do have a. Oh, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna go off to a different topic. I want you to finish your thought.
Absolutely. No, go off on the
You
other
fish.
topic.
Okay. The other topic, do you think that this is like a Neo in the Matrix kind of scenario where this isn't the first time the Nothing has tried
Oh,
to
absolutely.
destroy That's what it felt like to me. It felt like
Hmm.
it's the Empress. This isn't the first time she's had to get a new name. She's now owned effectively by Bastion, who
Yeah.
will one day grow old and die, and people will forget how to dream again, and she'll need a new name again.
Yep.
Because it seemed to me, and I was wondering if that might be the reason the Ancient One doesn't seem to care that much. Because maybe she's survived the many iterations of Fantasia. It's just like, yeah, it's gonna blow up. It'll be
Hmm.
fine. It'll work out again.
I mean, that is kind of how I read it as well. It's like
Okay.
this
Yeah.
has sort of happened before. It's going to happen again, and that's exactly why the Ancient One is just like, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's something happening, which is better than what I
Right.
usually get. It's better than my average day.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, it definitely. I get that this has happened before. I did like how the book though, the novelization actually has different colored text for what's happening in Fantasia versus what's happening in the real world,
Oh, neat.
which I thought was kind of a cool way to do that.
Yeah.
I really do want to find this book and maybe give it a read because it sounds like
Yeah.
the second half of it sounds really interesting, and I'd be curious to dive into that a little more. So,
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, overall, you didn't love the movie. I get that, but I think the appreciation of it, I can hear. I can hear in the way that you're talking about it, and sort of there were aspects of the technical parts of it that didn't work. For the most part, visuals work. There's a few shots here and there, composite
Mhm.
shots that are just like, well, okay, they're green screening that. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
it looks okay, but not great. But there's a lot of really good ones too. There's a lot of great composites within scenes, and all the puppet work and the production design of it, I think, is just top notch. I think it really,
Yeah.
really hit the mark. Um,
I
and
yeah, I didn't love it. I wouldn't probably watch it again. I felt like but a lot of that comes down to the fact like you talked about making it a series. Yeah, cuz there's a lot of really good undertones. There's a lot of really good story beats. There's a lot of things that are being said without being said
Hmm.
in this story. I just feel like as a kids movie for 90 minutes, there's just not enough room to let that bloom. Which weakens the movie to the point where I didn't really enjoy it. But I felt
Sure.
like if you were to extend this out and have some time to grow a relationship with Artax, to see some of Atreyu's adventures with him, to let that relationship mean something when the bad stuff happens, to
Yeah.
know where Artax's head is at. Like even letting him talk would have been, avoid the Mr. Edism of it all, but give him some way that it works.
Yeah.
I love what this is about,
Hmm.
and I think I can separate that from I didn't like the movie, if that makes a lot of sense, if any sense.
No, it does absolutely. Because it's tough. It's tough to condense all of that down into 90 minutes. Because if you make it, I feel like if you make this a 2.5 hour long movie, especially in the 80s, there's no way that's going
Mhm.
to fly.
Oh,
Um,
no.
you're just not going to be able to keep the pacing and the momentum going for that long. So you've got to tighten it up, and that's where the series aspect of it, like even short, like 6, 7, 8 episodes to just flesh out, because you can have Atreyu going out on his quest to start it and spending a lot of time with Artax, and we get the connection there, and then we get that taken away, and now we've got to deal with that, and there's a lot there. But I'm with you. Like I do feel like a lot of my love for this movie is a nostalgia bomb, in terms
Mhm.
of I remember watching it as a kid and the fantasy world that it was, and not really letting some of the stuff bother me because I'm a kid. It just didn't matter. And so I can take that and incorporate it in with like my appreciation of it now, and the different readings that I can get. Like I didn't clock that this has probably happened in a cycle over and over when I was a kid. Wouldn't have made,
Yeah.
like, just would have sailed over my head. But thinking about it as an adult makes perfect sense that that's how things go. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think coming to this at this age does make a huge difference. Um, but I'm still glad that you got to see it. I think because now, like,
Oh, yeah.
there's memes and discussions and things that you'll understand better, for one. Um, but I think also, like, just getting to see, like, this is what this type of story at this time in film, how they were telling it, and maybe
Mhm.
see that the influence that it had on film and television that came after it, you know?
Yeah, and I love movies. I'm a movie fan, So good, bad, ugly. If I get to watch it and then talk about it with someone, that's all the reason for me to enjoy it. Like I've gotten more joy out of discussing it with you than I got out of the movie itself, but that's okay. Like, that's
Sure.
the whole point. That's why we like to talk about movies. That's what we do. That movie
Yeah.
was terrible. Let's talk about for 2 hours why. You know, and then you end up walking away with like, well, you know what? Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought.
And, maybe at some point, you will want to show it to Sam. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
later.
possible, and maybe not. Who knows? But I am really glad that you got to see it and you got to share in some of that trauma, that
Yeah,
a
thanks for
bunch of us
inviting
went
me
through as a
along.
kid.
Yeah, now I know what's wrong with all of you. Thanks, thanks for bringing me along for the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we do a show together with some friends of ours. We
Yeah.
mentioned it already. Those were the days. Let people know about that, and anything else maybe you've got going on, like a certain convention coming up.
Oh yeah, we've done Travis, as he was saying, we do those were the days together with our friends Amy Frost and Audie Norman every Monday night at 9 p.m. over there at twitch.tv/2dorkstv. This week we're talking about, well, you're not going to hear that. This upcoming week we're talking about an episode I'm not going to tell you about because Travis doesn't know what it is yet. But you should just join us. You know what? Subscribe. And if you are going to be in at Dragon Con Labor Day weekend in Atlanta, you'll be able to find Travis and I along with Audie Norman at the convention doing those were the days live retro rewind roulette, talking about
Yes.
old stuff in a really fun and new way. It's going to be great. So come to the con and see us.
Yeah, and you'll be doing a couple other panels while you're there, which will be great.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's a
it's
great
going to be
time to
great.
just hang out and see people. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
that. So yeah, well, Stephen, as always, a pleasure having you on. It's just great fun to chat movies with you. I mean, we do it weekly talking about TV, but it's always fun to get you in here and talk about a movie too. Because I've gotten to show you some fun stuff. You know, I've shown you this. I made you watch Dogma, which was one.
Oh yeah,
that was a
good.
lot of fun. I exposed you to the Terminator, right? We watched that one.
Yeah, we did watch the
Yeah.
Terminator. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I did watch the Terminator. I can't remember if we talked about it, but I know I've been on the show. This is the third time, I believe. So yeah, I don't know. I remember watching the Terminator. It's probably for this.
Yeah, I think this might be the fourth because I think we also did Greenland. Because you
Holy
talked
crap!
that
Yeah,
movie up a
I
lot.
made you watch Greenland. That's right.
Yeah.
This is number 4. Yeah.
Yeah, which was a great one. Greenland was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and
man,
I'm
Greenland
sure
was
we'll do this
amazing.
again because
Of course.
we just enjoy chatting. So it's
I would
it's always
love
fun.
it.
And if you like this and you want to see it happening live, you can do that Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, twitch.tv/tvstravis or youtube.com/@tvstravis. It's also live there. Wednesdays, it comes out as a podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube in a visual format. And you can go to tvstravis.com to find the links for this, for Those Were the Days, for other shows that I have done and am working on, like Gore. Let's Watch Highlander is wrapping up its run. I've got one last thing to record for that, a couple more episodes that are going to come out. And then we'll be putting a bow on that one. And there's also links to merchandise, which we have. I have merchandise of my stuff as well as Those Were the Days merchandise now. So you can find that at tvstravis.com, and the Patreon is over there as well, patreon.com/WYHS for this show. Little as $1 an episode. Keep the lights on and help me do things like going to Dragon Con. It's the help of my wonderful patrons is why I'm able to do that this year. So definitely check all that stuff out. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure. Super fun. Until next week, and I'm going to be talking with Nisbet. He's coming back, and we're going to talk about Spider-Man: No Way Home because he hasn't seen it, so I get to expose him to that one. That'll be a lot of fun. So until then, just remember to enjoy your movies, and let's be excellent to each other, even in the swamp of sadness. This has been Wait You Haven't Seen.
To the winch, wench!
To the winch.
That's so great.